Welcome to a brief overview of the Texas Success Initiative. This PowerPoint presentation was created by the University of North Texas coordinators Catherine Boyle and Candy Harris, as well as me, the graduate assistant Kalia Schuneman. If you find yourself having any questions, comments, or concerns throughout our presentation, do not hesitate to contact us. All of our information can be found on the very last slide of this presentation. So let's get started. First, we're going to go over the general state law and conditions for exemption, and then we'll go over the assessment itself. Then we'll transition into a closer look at the University of North Texas's process of evaluating students and advising them. And then we'll conclude with some of the major significant points of the presentation. So the Texas Success Initiative is a statute that requires all undergraduate students in Texas who enter a public university to either demonstrate their readiness for college-level coursework by taking this state-approved assessment or meet some sort of condition for exemption. So in either case, they have to prove that they're ready to go on to college-level coursework. And they're going to do that either by taking the assessment or proving that they are exempt from taking the assessment. The two major functions of TSI are to assess the skills of students in reading, writing, and mathematics. And then, depending on their skill level, they might need to be advised into developmental coursework or other academic intervention. These are some of the most common exemptions from the TSI. If you'll notice the bolded information on the slide, if a student wants to be exempt from the TSI in reading, for example, they need a composite SAT score of 1070, as well as the critical reading or verbal score of 500. Also, be aware that for the STAR assessments, we can only take a score of level 2 on English 3 or a score of level 2 on Algebra 2. So if your district is not offering these STAR assessments, you might want to consider offering the TSI assessment for students who are not exempt by ACT or SAT, because this is all that we can take to exempt them. Okay, these are some more of the most common exemptions. For AP scores, students need to be aware that we might not receive scores until late July. So if this is their only way of being exempt, it could keep them from registering for college courses as quickly as they would like. For dual credit, regardless of whether or not their dual credit is listed on their high school transcript, we need to evaluate the college or university transcript. So students need to submit those separately. If students don't have any of these exemptions, then they need to take the assessment. It is computer-based, it is adaptive, it can be taken in a limited number of times, and just be aware that if a student needs to test in all 3 subject areas, the assessment could take them up to 6 hours to complete, so they really need to plan ahead. So these are the minimum scores that a student needs to earn on each subject area if they're going to be deemed TSI complete in that area. Notice that an essay score of 4 and a multiple choice score of 363 or an essay score of 5 is accepted regardless of their multiple choice score. So all of these scores need to be submitted to TSI advisors because they're often not listed on transcripts. The pre-assessment activity is a very brief assignment that students need to complete before they take the assessment. This just makes sure that they understand what the TSI is, why it's important, and it'll include some sample questions so that students know what to expect once they do test. Here are some tips and suggestions for students to prepare ahead for the assessment. The most important takeaway here is that students should test as early as possible to ensure that they are able to register for their college courses as soon as they can. Many universities include all of their testing information on their school websites as well. So that's it for our general outline of the state law. Now we're going to transition into a closer look at our university's process. We process exemptions after the student is admitted and registered for orientation, and these aren't automatic. We often have to process them ourselves. So it's very important for students to send in their scores to us, and remember that those dual credit transcripts need to be sent in separately. We might need their score reports separately, so it's important that students plan ahead. So we're going to evaluate whether they have any exemptions from the TSI assessment. If they do not meet any of the conditions for exemption, then they must take the TSI assessment. So all students who are not exempt will have a TSI hold placed on their account until we get them to test. So once they test, if their scores do not meet the state-mandated threshold, they're either going to be advised into developmental coursework, or depending on their score level, they might be allowed to enroll in college-level coursework with some kind of intervention. For example, this could be a special lab that they need to attend in addition to attending the course. So once the students successfully complete all of that developmental coursework or college-level coursework with intervention, then they are deemed TSI complete. The most important takeaways from this presentation are that TSI applies to all students. So all undergraduate students who attend a public university in Texas need to either take the TSI assessment or prove that they are exempt. A student's TSI status may affect their ability to register for classes. If they have not tested and they are not proven exempt, then a hold will be placed on their account. So that's why it's so important that students test as early as possible, because we want to get their scores in as soon as we can and get them registered. That concludes our presentation on the Texas Success Initiative. If you still have questions, feel free to contact TSI Coordinator Catherine Boyle, Candy Harris, or me, the Graduate Assistant Kalia Schuneman. Thank you so much for tuning in.